Thank you.
I call to order a meeting of the Court Reporters Board. It's Friday, January 27th, 2017 at 10 a.m. Ms. Bruning, could you do roll call and establish quorum?
Yes, Ms. Hurt.
Present.
Ms. Crom is absent. Ms. Lisinski.
Here.
Ms. Nocella.
Here.
Ms. O'Neill.
Here.
A quorum is reached.
Thank you. So I'd like to remind everyone that the proceedings of the board meeting are being recorded and webcasted. It's requested that anyone wishing to speak come forward as they're recognized. It's welcome but not required that speakers identify themselves. Our first agenda item is the approval of September 23rd, 2016 meeting minutes. Copies of minutes have been distributed. Does anyone have any edits, comments?
No, isn't that amazing? I don't. I bet you're really happy.
You've passed the Elizabeth test.
Yes. I just have one. Okay. And actually, two. On page 10, there's left justifications off. The board took a break at 11:02.
Is it page 10 of the minutes or page 10 of the packet?
10 of the packet.
Thank
Oh.
you. And which paragraph?
The board took a break at 11:02 a.m. The justification was just off.
That's so that it's in alignment with, it's just the outline format. I can change it, but it's in alignment with the beginning of the packet. So
Okay.
it sets it apart for a reason.
Okay, let's keep it at that.
Okay.
And then on page 14, it states that Ms. Lisinski's task force co-chair, they had their first meeting in 2015, wasn't it 2016?
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other comments? Okay. Public comments? So we'll move on to making a motion on the minutes. Would someone like to do so?
I move that we approve the minutes as amended.
Second. There's a second. Further discussion? All right. Call to vote?
1 minute. Ms. Crom is absent. Ms. Lisinski?
Here, present. Yes.
Yes. Ms. Nocella?
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill?
Yes.
Ms. Hurt?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 2 is the report of the executive officer. Looking forward to the year in review.
At the request of our esteemed chair, I'm going to start off with a year in review. We've had a busy year. We expect another busy year, so we just want to take a few minutes to review the board's work for the last calendar year. I want to just remind everyone that everything that you're about to see was accomplished with 3 full-time analysts, 1 half-time technician, and your executive officer.
Thank you.
So, leading off our accomplishments was getting the sunset review bill passed. The major things that came out of that was a shortened sunset term. We've got 3 years rather than 4, but we were able to increase our program funding for the ProPer program from $30,000 to $75,000, hoping to alleviate the backlog. And then our license fee cap increase was part of that. And as the board was fully aware, those were pieces of many bills, and it is the culmination of not just hearings before committees, but also lots of meetings with consultants. So that was a huge accomplishment for 1 bullet item. Additionally, the Best Practice Pointers Committee met, and they were able to develop 5 additional practice pointers, best practice pointers. Those, for everyone on the board should know, are very, very well received in the industry. And so we have had requests to do additional best practice pointers. So I've been collecting a file for future meetings so we can get some topics. People are saying we would like more information on X, Y, Z. So that file is building. We were supportive of SB 1007 that did get passed. That bill requires a court to dismiss an arbitration award if the court determines that the rights of a party were substantially prejudiced by the refusal of the arbitrator to allow the party, at the party's expense, to have a certified court reporter transcribe, present and transcribe the official record. So that's a powerful thing for people that need to have their appeal rights protected. So that we were happy to see that pass. We did go through the regulatory process so that we could do a technical correction to the scope of practice regulation that included public hearings. That we met with the Office of Public Affairs and developed the communications plan. And we were able to publish 2 CRB Today newsletters, and included in the newsletter production that just shows up on your desk. We developed the content matrix, so what we're going to have in it has to be developed. Then there's the coordination of collecting the articles, working with the deadlines. The articles are drafted. They're all drafted in-house. We contact CSR students that we're highlighting, layout, design, and then the coordination of the review process, because it goes through staff, through the chair, and through legal. So there's an extensive review process before that gets passed. In addition to that, we worked extensively with the California Court Reporters Association in furtherance of their bill SB 270 authored by Mendoza. That required a lot of meetings, a lot of background work, a lot of data gathering. Additionally, we are in the midst of requesting an amicus brief for Byrd versus Barkley. We've received training on the North Carolina Dental Board antitrust case, and on our schools, on-site school reviews. That program has been reinstituted now that the budget is sound, and 2 of them were accomplished. This was a huge, huge undertaking for the board, and I can't tell you how much staff time was put into that, because we had to redevelop. We had, review instruments from before, but we really needed to update them. They were dated. It had been several years since we had been on site at a school. So there was a lot of staff time in making sure that what we had was relevant to today, and then the actual going on site, looking through records, talking to students, talking to instructors. So that was a huge undertaking, and 2 of them are completed. And then additionally, the whole accreditation issue is coming to a bad head, and so we have been spending staff time trying to support the student or the schools as much as we can. So we're working with them, writing letters as requested, trying to do what we can in our limited scope.
There's more?
There's more. So during last year, there were a series of meetings. We held 2 town hall meetings. We held the Sunset Review hearing. We had, I shouldn't say the hearing, but we met in order to further that. The Online Skills Task Force met in September. We had 4 board meetings, and then the non-CSR owned firm subcommittee had those 4 meetings. January technically was this calendar year. I would just point out that this list of meetings does not include meetings that staff is required to attend for administration purposes, training purposes, executive updates. So there are meetings that staff does that is not included on there. And I just want to give the board kind of a feel for what goes into putting a meeting on. For staff, that means coordinating the schedule of attendees, which can be extremely tricky and time-consuming. It includes arranging for meeting space, booking travel for the attendees and staff, drafting agendas, preparing packets, arranging for telephone or video conferencing, and then preparation of minutes afterwards. So when someone says, hey, let's just meet, can do. That's what's involved. We also had examinations. So under the examination desk, we processed 412 applications for 3 different skills tests. We processed 221 applications for 3 English tests. And we processed 205 applications for 3 professional practice tests. In addition, we went into the administration of 3 skills tests. What goes into the test in the background, after the application processing, where I just gave you the numbers, candidates have to be scheduled, preparation and distribution of final notices has to happen, there's coordination of staff, proctors, and readers, and then preparation of the on-site packets for the candidates at the exam. After that, then there is grading, which is also a substantial task. After the grading comes the appeals. So there's the appeals is a large deal as well. So you have to copy all of the test transcripts and the notes to return to the candidate. Arrangements have to be made for the potential appellants to listen to the exam recording in Northern California and Southern California. There's coordination with the appeals committee members for a meeting date, and then copying, organizing the appeals for the appeals committee meeting. And following the decision of the appeals committee is notification of the appellants of the results, whether it's an approval or denial. And then in conjunction with the examinations that we do, we completed 7 exam development workshops as well as occupational analysis workshops. And the background of that includes recruiting the subject matter experts, arranging all of the travel, and contracts with the subject matter experts. And those are held in conjunction with the Office of Professional Exam Services, who support us in facilitating that. And when we get to the area of licensing, we processed 86 initial license applications last year and approximately 6,900 renewal applications. We cashier in-house, so all of the checks are processed in-house. We answer the telephone, we answer email inquiries, we open all the incoming mail. Preparing and mailing 3-year letters are notifications to licensees that are in a delinquent status that their license is about to expire. They have 3 years to remain delinquent before it's assigned. So we do send them a courtesy letter letting them know that that's going to happen. And then we process all name and address changes.
Can you remind everybody one more time how many folks are in the office?
Yes, we have 3 full-time analysts. We have 1 half-time technician, and me.
Thank you.
And then the next slide, enforcement. So in enforcement, we processed 100 formal written complaints, closing 91 investigations. She initiated 6 cases with the Attorney General's office and issued 10 citations and fines. She returned over 500 phone calls. Now those are the ones that she can track while she's doing something else. So that's not capturing any of the people that call in just in between during the day, the regular course of business. So it's easily much higher than that. This year, in the regular course of business, we processed 72 timesheets for staff and board members, reconciled monthly leave balances. We onboarded 1 staff person this year, and just on note on that, for the half-time position that we advertised for, we received over 130 applications. All of those applications had to be screened and rated, and that was an incredibly time-consuming process. After that review was done, then we had to hold interviews before we were able to fill that position. So that in and of itself was a huge thing. And then once they're on board, as well as onboarding the new staff person or the new board member, there's just a mountain of forms. Carrie, I think it's just, as the newest board member, it's like, please don't be afraid, but we are just going to paper your inbox. So all of it has to be done. There's coordination of training that's involved in that. We need to provide an explanation of background materials about the board and the board's activities. We did separate 1 board member. Again, it's a mountain of paperwork. Insisted staff with open enrollment changes, coordinating training for staff and board members. Training includes sexual harassment prevention, defensive driver, info security awareness, ethics, and board member orientation. And then also managed the conflict of interest filings, the Form 700 filings. Yes, there's one. We negotiated contracts for the various exam sites, purchase office supplies and business equipment, specifically laptop replacement, printer replacement of a smartphone. The process for that includes purchase orders, contracts, bids, searching for small business and disabled vet businesses because the state tries to support that type of supplier. So that takes some time to research and find, and it comes with its own mountain of paperwork. We coordinated with DCA Publications Design and Editing on different outreach items and surveying equipment, outdated and non-operational equipment. When we have a printer that no longer works, we can't just ditch it. There's an approval process to dispose of any equipment, especially anything IT related. We need to find a recycler or an e-waste location and fill out the requisite forms.
You know, I think for people to get a good idea of how much time this stuff involves is, as a private business person in the past, and all of you that are in private business environments, take the time that it would normally take you to do all what Yvonne just described and multiply it by about 4 or 5. And that's the amount of time the bureaucracy requires to do all that stuff.
She's not done.
I'm in bureaucracy too, so I know.
Okay, so all of the meetings require travel. So there are travel involved with board meetings, town hall meetings, task force meetings, the sunset hearing, exam development workshops, the on-site school reviews. So we processed over 30 travel claims for staff and board members. We have annual reporting requirements through the Department of Consumer Affairs as they conduct their annual report. With monthly vacancy reports that we process. Our organizational charts are submitted semi-annually, and we have an annual business continuity plan that's reviewed and updated. Legislation and regulation, we tracked and responded to inquiries, as I mentioned, for SB 270. We responded to all of the sunset review inquiries, sent letters of support as directed by the board. Letters of appreciation went out to legislative staff members that helped us with the sunset review process. We have the regulatory process through the scope of practice, and then DCA does almost quarterly, roughly quarterly legislative roundtable meetings that staff attended. And last but not least is the transcript reimbursement fund. The program approved 295 invoices, returning 38 applications. The ProPER program approved 56 invoices, provisionally approved 95 transcripts, which involved 55 cases, and returned 19 applications. They responded to written and telephone inquiries, which includes citations, researching, interpreting laws and regulations, application status, and eligibility questions. And then additionally, staff reports on those statistics at our board meetings. In summary, the words you've all been waiting for in summary. As an EO, I am truly blessed to have an amazing board of hardworking professionals who are committed to protecting California consumers, and I'm thankful every day for the dedicated staff that I work with that allow you to accomplish your mission.
Yes, thank you. I think
Thank
we're
you.
all very thankful. Yeah, the board has asked a lot of you all, and you all have stepped up. You've done the yeoman's work. It's been an amazing year, and we are all very thankful for that. And I thought it was important to just take the time to sit back and everybody just reflect on how much has happened. And again, I thank you and the staff for really making us look great and keeping things rolling. Thank you. So on to fun stuff.
The budget, everybody's favorite. On page 20, you'll see our most current expenditure projections. If anybody has questions on specific line items, I can address it, but often we're a bottom line kind of group, and so after the review, you can see that we are expected to have a surplus of 8%, which in our small small world is really good. So it's a good spot to be in.
Do we have any preliminary expected costs for the additional exam at this time?
They're not included in this particular one yet.
Yeah. Okay, do we have any thoughts on what we're looking at number-wise?
I can tell you that the Sacramento is usually between $3,000 to $8,000.
And then the halftime person, that doesn't fall under temp help.
No, the temp help is exclusively for grading the exams. Our half-time person that was just added, I mean, that's a good segue into the next one. We did add a half-time person to work exclusively on the ProCurve program of the Transcript Reimbursement Fund. Our successful candidate was Melissa Davis, who worked for the board a couple of years ago. The real benefit to having Melissa back is she is unfailingly cheerful. So no matter what happens to that woman, she drops it at the door and comes into the office ready to work and happy to do her job. And if anybody's in crisis mode, drop what she's doing and help them. And she's trained. So clearly there have been some changes to the program, but the training is minimal. So that's really saving us a lot of time and will, I think, allow us to get up and going on that backlog much quicker. Were there other questions on the projections? So going to page 22 is the our total fund condition, which I think many of you know. The projections is kind of our checking account. This is our savings account. This is the overall condition of what the fund looks like.
That was page 21.
22.
That's the TRF.
Oh, sorry, 21. Thank you for the correction, Paul.
Sorry.
Our court reporters fund is 21. TRF is 22. And if there are no questions on the fund, I would turn it over to Paula for an update on the transcript reimbursement fund.
Could you just remind our new board member and the public how many months in reserve the board likes to keep?
Well, there's a statutory requirement that we need a minimum of 2 months in reserve and a maximum of 24 months.
And we're expected in 2018, 2019 would be at 1.9.
Yes, that's the projection.
And then 2017, 2018, we're projected for 4.6.
Yes.
Thank you.
TRF?
Please.
Okay, so as Yvonne mentioned, we hired Melissa Davis, who is already trained with the ProCurve program. So she jumped right in, minimal updates for her. So even though she had a lot of paperwork to do as a new employee and waiting for a computer, she's already reviewed quite a few applications. She's already approved 8 with over $3,000 in provisional approvals. We still have over 100 applications pending for that program, dating back to February of last year. But she's, like I said, jumped right in and got that ball rolling. For the pro bono program, we have approved fiscal year to date over $180,000 in invoices, totaling 289 invoices. We still have a major backlog, but with the addition of Melissa, I am catching up on those. The applications date back to August of last year, which is significant for our board, but I do see a light at the end of that tunnel now with the help that we've added.
Is that the first time it's been that far?
Since she left, the year that she was gone, 15 months or so, it got pretty bad.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay, going back to my report on the exams, starting on page 23 are the updated historical charts that indicate the pass rates for all 3 of the different portions of the license exam. I don't know if anybody has questions on those particular statistics. But one thing that I would ask under this line item is for the board to appoint a committee to assist in writing the skills portion of the exam.
Okay. Is this something that we can take in this item, agenda item?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any comments from the board on that? Or
Do you want to
questions?
give us a brief summary of
So what happens with the exam, the physical making of the exam, the board does have some policies. The test is to be 200 words a minute for 15 minutes. 10 of them will be transcribed. There's a density between 1.3 and 1.5. That's to try and give it some kind of continuity so that the test isn't super easy. There's too many easy words, one-syllable words, not too hard, too many multisyllabic words. That kind of gives us our guideline. So it's not terribly technically hard to count these tests out. It's extremely time-consuming. Once that's done, then the test is pre-tested or performed. It's read for a group of licensees, so they've been licensed for a year or less. And so then we get their feedback, because even though words are words on paper, sometimes when you say them, it comes out like Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. It's like, that's a little bit hard to take down. So that's not what our intent is for the students. It should be entry level, nothing tricky, but we practice it so that we know what it sounds like, and we have feedback from reporters who can tell us what it feels like taking down.
Okay, and so what kind of, you're looking for committee members who have what kind of skills or?
I would anticipate it would be court reporters, because we're looking for their transcripts,
Right,
in all honesty. It would be up to the board. Several of the instructors have approached me saying they would be interested. The instructors are conflicted out of helping with their written exam. I would imagine that it would be the board's pleasure that it would be a conflict with them
I agree.
as well, although with a very large test bank, it decreases security concerns. But that would be a policy for the board to decide.
So this committee really does need to be chaired by court reporters.
And a board member, correct?
Well,
The chair should be, I think
A
you would
board.
want a board member.
Yeah.
And then the way our board has operated is you, as the chair of the board, would appoint the committee chair, then the committee chair will go out and get their own committee members.
So we're all looking this direction.
that's right.
To the court reporter that's
well,
on
we
the
have one
laptop.
court reporter on the board who is not here. So,
Yeah.
No, I'm more than happy to share that.
Oh,
We
Tony,
appreciate
you're
that.
awesome.
We thank you, Graham. Thank you very much. That will be a huge help. So would someone like to make a motion to appoint
I don't think that you need
or
that.
create a committee?
It's the chair's discretion.
Okay, great.
It just,
Oh, but
you
thank
don't
you,
need a
Tony.
motion to actually create the.
Mm, Tony.
Then, thank you, Ms. O'Neill. You have that appointment now.
I will just say, Tony, I will work with you on
Yes, you
coordinating
will.
getting the members together and then getting a meeting together. And I have started getting some background materials for training for that.
Great. Wonderful.
We are in the midst of an occupational analysis that the Office of Professional
Wait,
Exam.
wait, wait,
Oh, I'm sorry,
comment.
Tracy.
We're going to ask for public comment on the
Um,
committee. Could we?
Public
comment.
Yeah, we can take it now. We typically try to take it at the end of the agenda item, but you're welcome to come up, Dr. Montez, and speak
I
to.
appreciate that, sorry.
No problem.
Another meeting.
Don't be sorry.
As well.
Okay, speak up.
I will speak up and I will go quickly.
So can you state what agenda item exactly you'd like to speak on?
I just wanted to speak on the creation of the committee that you just was addressing. And I basically wanted, well, first of all, Tracy Montez, the Division Chief of Programs and Policy Review, and the Office of Professional Examination Services is one of the units in my division, and Yvonne's going to give a report on the occupational analysis that Amy's been doing for your board. But I did want to offer our services with regard to the skills portion of the test. In, again, a consultation role under your pro bono that your board does provide. And basically, we would like to assist you in making sure that we can provide some psychometric guidance. Historically, we have not been involved in the skills portion of the test, mainly because of staffing issues and so forth, but I'm happy to report that we're fully staffed and we have some additional resources. So given that you're looking at building this bank and going in a different direction, we have the occupational analysis that's in the pilot stage. This is a really great opportunity to make sure that we link up the skills portion with the occupational analysis to give you the additional evidence of validity, because right now you have your board oversight, you have your subject matter experts involved. If we can add that psychometric component, then that's the 3 prongs of the stool that I kind of use as an analogy of supporting the examination process. So in the defensibility, it's really important to have all 3 of those pieces so that it's a real strong process. So if you're open to that, we'd like to have Amy and myself and Heidi again work with Yvonne, just again to kind of provide some guidance as you're selecting subject matter experts, as you develop the process of reviewing it, also looking at the requirements that you have for your exam. It's my understanding that there isn't a history of how that came to be. Well, we'd like to make sure that you have that documentation in terms of subject matter expert input, and again, confirming it through the occupational analysis. And again, all that's done is to, again, add to the strength, the validity, the legal defensibility, any kind of challenges that you might have. So I'll just kind of throw all that out there and let you give it some thought over time. But again, we're more than happy to help you with that.
Well, we appreciate your offer, and I'm sure we can coordinate with Ms. Venner and Board Member O'Neill.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just let the board know that we have had a really positive working relationship with OPES, and if their help with our skills portion is anything like their help with our written portions, then we are in good hands.
Wonderful. Thank you. We need all the help we can get.
Absolutely. Amy's here. I wasn't necessarily expecting that. Do you want to update us on the occupational analysis since you're here?
I can.
It's probably, she gave me the words, but she's here, so.
Good morning.
Welcome.
I'm Amy Welch-Gandy from the Office of Professional Examination Services. And as Tracy mentioned, we are in the pilot, getting ready to send out the pilot survey for the occupational analysis. It began with interviews. We interviewed court reporters throughout the state to find out what is a typical day like as a reporter and what things have changed in the last 5 to 10 years, what's anticipated for the future, what are some up and coming things happening. We held a workshop with, I don't remember how many, but around I think 8 or so reporters from all over the state that came in, officials, deposition reporters, to find out what kind of task and knowledge statements we wanted to include in our survey. So now we are getting ready to send out the pilot. The pilot will go to all of the people who participated in the interviews as well as who attended the workshop. Once that gets sent out and we get feedback from those people, we will send out a final questionnaire to a sample of 2,000 reporters throughout the state of California.
Any questions from the board? What kind of timeline do you see moving forward to have like a final product?
The final product is anticipated to be complete June 2017. So once the results come back from the final survey, we will have another workshop with reporters where they will look at the results and kind of help us parse out, does the data reflect as they see the profession? If we have people from, like, for example, we send out 2,000, but let's say the majority for some reason comes back that officials all fill out the survey, but we don't get the depot side. So we would talk about, why that is. And then we would finalize the exam plan in that workshop based on the results of the data. We would be developing a dictation exam plan as we have now, the English exam plan, the professional practice exam plan, and that's our blueprint that tells us how many questions we will be asking on the exam in each content area, and then the ultimate product will be a validation report with all of the information, all the steps of the process, how the task and knowledges fell out as far as their criticality.
Sounds like hard work and important work.
Yes.
Can I ask, how does that get incorporated into our ongoing?
Exam development.
Yes.
So the results of the occupational analysis ultimately go into creating what's called an exam plan or a blueprint. That tells us the proportion of questions that get asked. So for example, in professional practice, there's a content area now called ethics. So in the new one, we've continued to keep that area called ethics, at least at this point. But when we look at the results, we'll see how important that ethical area came back based on what all the reporters said out there. That will tell us the percentage or weight of the exam will be based on ethics. And then we have several other content areas as well. So all of the data supports how the weighting will be applied to the exam. So there's 100 items. If ethics comes back and it's determined it's 20%, 20 questions will be on ethics.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. If you look on page 29, you'll see our usual enforcement reports. There's nothing really remarkable to report as far as trends or numbers or anything like that. Are there any questions? Okay, so I touched on the school reviews. We did do on-site reviews for College of Marin, a public school, and then Golden State, which is a private school. And they went very well, especially when it was what I call our maiden voyage. It was learning on our end as well. And the staff of the schools were very welcoming, very open. It's not like they come in and I'm sure that it's a lot of work when we're there. I'm sure that we're very disruptive, but they all made us feel welcome, and anything that we needed to know, they were willing to answer. So I really appreciate the hospitality. The board has been on a high level following the ACICS issue. So as expected, they did not get recognition from the federal government, so there is no more ACICS. That's left the private schools in a terrible position, and I see Sandy here, and I don't know if you were planning to come and tell the board more. She will have the most update, the most current knowledge, but we have written letters at the request, and they're included in the board binder starting on page 31. And so we really are trying to support them to the extent that we can, and hopefully that message is out there loud and clear. Sandy, if there's something you think the board would want to know, I would invite you to come up.
Yeah, please come forward.
Report.
Sure.
What's happening on behalf of the private schools. The others couldn't be here today. Hi, I'm Sandy Finch. I'm with Golden State College. As Yvonne mentioned, on December 12th, it came down that the ACICS was no longer recognized as a federally recognized accreditor. And then immediately, the US DOE sent out an addendum for all of us that we were required to sign with terms and conditions. It's a lot. And for those of us who really felt like we were just minding our own business, and then one day this all happened to us. It really did come as a sucker punch, really. And so we really felt like this has been an indiscriminate dismantling of very quality programs, not just court reporting schools, but all ACICS schools across the nation. So it's been rather a blow and a very exciting holiday time to start getting them the paperwork they required. I can report that all of the private schools in California, I can speak for them here today, that we've all hit the deadline so far to date. The next one that's coming up is that by March 12th, we all must have in progress status with a new accrediting agency. So that's huge because that means applications have to go in. I'm happy and I have a smile on my face because I don't know how it all miraculously happened, but I have my application in to ACCET, which is a federally recognized agency, ACCET, and that deadline was January 20th. So I got that done. And also, I know that the other schools are also planning, as I did, to submit to the Bureau, which I understand is upstairs. I feel like going saying, hi, did you get my package? I know they did because they sent me a letter of receipt. But, and that is to absolutely cover your assets, shall we say, that we seek full approval from the state of California, assuming the worst, just to assume the worst, that for some reason you don't get accreditation in time. Did I mention that June 12th is the deadline? The Department of Education, they are stepping in, if you will, as the bridge. They're acting as an accrediting agency themselves until June 12, 2018. After June 12, 2018, if we do not have accreditation in place, then we are no longer Title IV eligible.
What are the options?
There are some options, and you know, usually the private schools have all kind of gone together. Well, that's what the problem was. We're all with ACICS. I'm going with ACCET, and I believe one of the other schools is going with COE, Council on Education. One of the other schools is debating between ACCSC and COE. So they better, I'm not sure what they've finally decided. I can't speak to that, I don't know. But we're working kind of as comrades in arms, communicating a lot, making sure that what happened to our poor friends, you know, at Sage doesn't happen to the rest of us and to our students. So I feel encouraged. When my package went out, okay, I can't go further. Your letter seriously did make me cry.
Oh, wow.
It was so right on the money. It was beautiful. It was accurate. It was strongly written. And so on behalf of all of us, thank you. I attached it to any application I sent in to the state or to the accreditor. I attached it. I also attached your other one that you had sent previously in August because that was gorgeous, so I sent that as well. We also had letters from the National Court Reporters Association that we attached saying, you know, pleading on behalf of the private schools here in California and trying to explain the situation, how important it would be. So the package that went out was, I think, well, it was the best Sandy Finch could do. I mean, it's there, and I really felt very hopeful. So hope springs eternal. So you do the best you can, and that's until they drag me up by my ankles. I'm not going anywhere.
So this board is definitely supportive of all the efforts, and if there's anything else that we can do, please let us know. Iman and I both drafted those letters.
It was gorgeous.
And, I think they did come out just right. So if you need additional letters, let us know, and we'll do what we can. I do have one question.
Yes.
Did you absorb any of the SAGE students in your school?
Only to help them out. because we're an on-campus. So we're in the Bay Area. So if there were any online students that were locally around, I mean, they drove a couple hours, but they did come, and we just invited them. It's no charge. It's like all for one, one for all for one, or whatever that goes. And so they came and would sit in our 4-voice getting ready for the next exam and just trying to help out that way. But we wish we could have helped more. We just don't have an online program. So that was sort of one of those things. But I don't know. I hope that's going well. But that's the report. I just think that we all are very busy. I'm sure that I know the other schools are still preparing applications, and it's a huge task. So I'm sure that's where they are now. Oh yes,
Did you say that DOE is acting as an accreditor until June 12th of this year or next year?
2018.
Thank you.
Wait.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
I wrote that down.
because we had a year and a half.
Okay.
So now we're down to like a year and 4 months.
Sure.
Tick, tick, tick. And I hope that what Golden State is doing is that we've applied to the Bureau upstairs, just preparing for the worst. You hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So if somehow we lost our accreditation and we're kaput, we at least would have our license to remain open. And then we could just continue, but we wouldn't be Title IV eligible. So our students would have to go to cash pay. It's not our objective to close out at all, although the DOE required of all of our schools a teach-out plan. It's a very, it's an upsetting letter because they just assume you're going to fail, and they're doing everything they can do, I think, to make you fail.
Are they restricting you from onboarding new students?
If we can show that what I'm doing is full disclosure. You think you think full disclosure. You have to let a student know if you want to come to Golden State, you're taking the risk that on June 12th you may not be eligible for further financial aid. Our schools are eligible for that. There's some bad information out there. Our schools are still eligible for financial aid in this period of time. The students are eligible. But as of June 12th, if we don't have accreditation in place, then yes, they have to enroll with the understanding that they have this 14-month period of time. So that's the problem with the program, our length. If we were a school that was, dog grooming and you're done in 6 weeks, it would not even be an issue. So that's what's currently going on. I think I hit all the points.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just let you know, I spoke with Joanne Wenzel, who is my counterpart upstairs, as Sandy said, that she's with the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education. And we sent the letter, and she called me and said, just so that we all knew, her staff is processing anybody that's caught in the ACICS loss of accreditation. They are giving priority to those applications so that they can be processed in time to help you, basically.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good to hear.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other public comments on that item? No? Okay. So we'll move on to, will you speak to the closure?
Yes, I can do that. So, starting on page 39 is the closure letter from Sage College that she gave to the board, and then following at 40 is the letter that went out to the students. So it was definitely a sad day to lose the school, and especially to lose it so quickly. I think it was difficult for everybody concerned. The BPPE upstairs at Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education has a team that goes out. They immediately leapt into action. They have somebody that works on school closures. They have somebody that works on the STRIP program, which is Student Tuition Recovery Fund, I believe. And so they organized a meeting, basically a day of workshops that was open to all of the students from Sage College, and they invited me to go with, and so I did, and it was really helpful for me to learn more about what the students' options were. I think I brought program perspective from court reporting because there are some elements that are unique to court reporting. So it was a tough day, but I think we talked to almost 90 people, so it was a good, significant portion of the students took time to come by and explore their options.
And if I could just highlight, this is really important for the board because it's projected in 2018 that there will be 2,320 new job openings with court reporting. So there is a demand, and we need to be able to make sure consumers have individuals that they can turn to for assistance, whatever matter they have.
Yeah, it's difficult to get the message out to potential candidates in the recruiting because they look at the shrinking number of schools that are available, thinking that's a reflection of the industry when it's completely not.
Yeah.
If you can make it through the program, there is a job for you.
I have a question. When you were at that workshop for the 90 some students that showed up, what was your, at the end of the day, what was your sense of the students as far as, yes, they're going to go through, or I'm sure at that time you were probably still in shell shock, you know, from it, but did you have any sense of their determination or resilience
I
to go
spoke,
on?
I think, with most of the qualifier class because they had expected to come back on Tuesday and go into qualifiers in order to get into the March exam. So they obviously were very committed, and I kind of talked with them on their options. I don't think anybody at that level is thinking about dropping off. The theory babies were pretty easy to, you're not that far into it, you can move to another program, you can speed quickly through it, so it's not as big a deal. It was very difficult to get a sense for the people in between from 100 to like 180. That just is going to depend on basically how bad do you want it, because at the end of the day, it is up to you and how much you want it. It's a self-motivating program, so I didn't get a feel for which direction it's going.
So, okay, on to the disciplinary guideline regulation.
Yes, the Methical Disciplinary Guidelines Regulation is on my list. I just want to assure the board that I know that it is something the board has tasked me with, and that it's on my list, but I have nothing to report.
Okay. All right, agenda item 3 is the license fee increase.
Well, Madam Chair, just public comments.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I thought about the public comments earlier. Are there any public comments on items A through I that folks would like to make in addition? No? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 3, license fee increase. This is a discussion and possible action to adopt a resolution to increase the renewal fees for licensees pursuant to our Business and Profession Code Section 8031D. Would you like to give a staff report?
Sure. So if you look on page 47, it's just a repeat of our overall fund condition where Chair Hurd pointed out that budget year 17-18, our months in reserve will go underneath the 6 months that trigger some implications in the TRF, and that we can't fund it. And then in budget year 18-19, we're projected to fall to just under 2 months in reserve, which will, by law, is a problem for us. So in anticipation, the board has been watching this very closely. So in anticipation of that happening, I asked our budget analyst to give us 3 different scenarios. So on page 48, scenario A shows the effect of increasing the license fee by $25. The next page, scenario B, increases it by $50, and then scenario C increases it by $75.
Before we get into board comments, I want to thank Senator Hill, who actually supported this bill and got it through so that we could have the license fee cap increase, and we're able to talk about it today. As everybody remembers, there was a lot of difficulty because it was labeled as a tax bill. A lot of folks don't want to touch a tax bill with that. But he worked through it and authored it, and we're here today. So there are 3 different scenarios before us. Would a board member like to start on their discussion on the scenarios?
Well, there's no point in doing $25.
I agree.
It gets us not far at all. So I think the discussion needs to go to whether 50 or 75, and is 75 too big of a jump? 50 gets us at least out to 20, it gets us out significantly far, with a healthy amount of funds. And that gives us the leeway in whatever year to revisit and add more money later.
Okay.
So I am leaning personally towards the $50.
So scenario B.
Yes.
Okay. Board Member Michela or Board Member O'Neill?
That was my reaction too, as Elizabeth, is I am tending to go with the 175. You know, the board has a history of not raising the fee for a long time. But the board has a history of being very conservative in raising it, very conscientious of the impact on the industry. While at the same time making sure that the board is in financial good shape to do the work to protect the consumer. And when I thought about this, I was comfortable with the idea of raising it $50 to $175 a year. That still gives us another step to raise if something happened with the economy again, or something unexpected, we would still have some wiggle room to increase it. And so that's where I'm coming from in agreeing with the $50 increase on licensing fee.
Quick question. So I'm doing the quick math. That can be very dangerous. So a $50 increase is a 40% increase in current dues, right? And a $75 increase is a 60% increase in dues. Would that be fair to say? When was the last time we raised dues?
July of 2010.
And Ms. Fenner, looking at the options before us, I agree with Ms. O'Neill that $25 doesn't get you much from a budgetary standpoint, but in your opinion, $50 or $75, what is the most fiscally responsible thing for us to do, in your opinion? What would help the most to provide the most benefit?
Well, from a timing aspect, the license fee is increased by board resolution, so we don't need a lot of advance time. However, there are things that have to happen. We do need to contact IT. There will be reprogramming that has to happen in the database, and then the renewal forms would have to be reprinted. So we do want to give our support people a few months lead time, at least, to make sure that all can happen. So, but I think that we've been good about waiting until we really need to increase it. But if there were more involved and we needed more lead time, then I would be more supportive of the $75 increase. As our law stands right now, I don't think that we need that. We have the flexibility to move a little bit quicker.
So Yvonne, Ms. Fenner, sorry. Do we need to also state when we would like this increase to be activated?
Yes.
And so that's a further discussion. Okay, so we're going to break out those two parts.
Those are the two elements that I
Okay.
need in order to help you with the motion.
So Board Member Michela, which scenario speaks to you?
I'm more supportive of a $50 increase because I really like the fiscal responsibility of it, and I think it gives you an opportunity, if we need to at a later date, to move in a different direction. But I'm supportive of making an increase that provides you some results that you need for your reserves, but also is respectful of our licensees as well.
Okay. So I won't repeat everyone's comments and just echo that I agree with them. I think 50 is the middle ground that is not too much pressure for the licensee and not just enough for us to get the work that we need done for several years. So leaning to scenario B, which would be $50 increase, having a total of $175. At what point would we like to start that increase?
I would ask for a recommendation from our executive officer, because you're aware of the timing. So I would like that input.
Well, I had originally recommended that we started at the beginning of the next fiscal year because I was looking at the legally required amount, the 1.9.
So July of this year.
But my able staff on legal pointed out to me, reminded me that the TRF does have a trigger point of 6 months, so we would not be able to fund that. So that's why I am now looking at, according to our fund condition, sometime during this, well, by the end of this budget year, we would be under that 6 months. So we possibly want to go with beginning of 18.
January.
So January 1st, 2018?
Yes, I think that gives us good cushion to get the changes and implemented before it would impact the TRI.
Okay. Is there a comment?
Well, budget year 17-18 starts July 1st of this year, right?
Oh, yes.
Because that says 4.6.
By
That's
the
under
end,
6 months. That's
by the end of that year.
by the end of the year. Okay.
By the end of that, which would be July of 18.
Okay. June 30th of 18.
Yes, sorry.
No, that's
Yes,
just double checking.
yes.
I understand.
Thank you.
So when are you recommending?
2018.
January.
January, okay.
January 1.
Want to make sure.
I think that makes it so much simpler for the licensees too. You just make it most of us don't think in fiscal terms, we think in calendar years, right?
And that will give everybody a clean break. That will give, because we renew based on our birth month. And so everybody is paid at the current rate through December. And then come January, we start at the new rate. So I think that would be a very clean way of doing it.
Okay, so it sounds like everybody agrees with Ms. Finner's suggestion to begin on 2018. Yeah.
So let me propose language for a motion to be.
Do we have public comment?
We'll do that first.
Yes, I'd like to.
Before.
Is there any public comment on the fee increase? Okay, seeing that there are. Yes? No?
What you've all just said just seems very reasonable. That's all. I think
That's a great
it's
comment.
very reasonable. and-
From a licensee, we appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so thoughtful language.
So the motion would be for the board to increase the license fee to $175 for any license that expires on or after January 1st of 2018.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I so move based on that
Sorry, just a
language.
second.
Did you?
I think that you have to be careful about when the license expires, because if someone's license expires prior and they renew late, then the new fee would be effective.
So do you want to read?
This was recommended from legal, so that's why I'm looking this up.
So legal is there.
So the question was, what happens if somebody renews late? It's for the license. My recommendation is that you pick you set a sort of a effective date for a license that expires on a certain date, because you want to avoid a license that expires, say, in February. If somebody renews in in December, because the renewals generally go out about 60 days out. Somebody renews in December, you want to apply the same fee to them as a person who license expires on the same day but doesn't renew until January. So that's why we recommend that you look at the expiration date of the license, not just say the fee is as of a certain date. If somebody applies late, is that the concern?
Yes.
Well, they would still be looking at when their license expired. Then they would be, is there, do you do a delinquent fee, do you guys?
Yes.
So then they would also be subject to the delinquent fee.
So as I understand it, the language that we're proposing, as you recommended, would capture based on when your individual license expires. So it wouldn't matter kind of when you're turning it in. If you're turning it in early or turning it in late, you might incur the delinquent fee, but your fee is going to be the same no matter when you do it.
So if
Does that
my
make sense?
license expires on December 31st of 2017, but I let it be delinquent for 3 years, I would still pay the December 2017 fee plus the 50% late fee. I wouldn't be held to the new license renewal.
Only for the first year. That the first initial year they would be delinquent. The second year, even though they're delinquent, they're under the higher price.
Okay. And
So it's,
I just wanted to make sure that you captured that's the initial and renewal fee.
Well, yes.
Is that right?
I think that the way the law is set, we set the application fee and it applies to
It's the same
renewals.
as the renewal fee, right?
And then the delinquent fee is 50% on
Right.
that same fee.
so is your wording still the same?
Yes.
It's still valid. So could you just repeat it quickly again for everybody?
I have increased the fee to $175 for licenses that expire on or after January 1st, 2018.
I so move based on that language.
And the motion is to adopt by resolution,
Yeah.
is that right?
And I second that.
Okay, are there any public comments? Seeing that there are none, could we take
Ms. Crom is absent. Ms. Lisinski,
Yes.
Ms. Nocella,
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill,
yes?
Ms. Hurt,
Yes.
motion carries.
I think we can breathe a sigh of relief that we have money now.
Really?
Sure. Like many of us were a little concerned about that. Not a little, a lot, actually. Okay, that takes us to agenda item 4, which is the non-licensee-owned firm subcommittee report. There's a discussion and possible action from the report. At the September 23rd meeting, the board voted to form a subcommittee to work with stakeholders to formulate options for ways to fulfill our consumer protection mission by ensuring that all firms, and I want to underline all firms offering court reporting services, are adhering to existing statutes and regulations. Myself and board member Nocella agreed to serve on the committee. We've had multiple meetings with the Attorney General's office, different stakeholders, and obviously in-house with our board and staff. Today, our action is really to consider in this limited forum the information that board member Nocella and I will give to everyone, and then recommendations on how we can move forward. So, would you like to say a few words about our subcommittee meeting?
I mean, I'll keep it very brief. I think the subcommittee meetings were incredibly beneficial. I think we were able to get significant direction from stakeholders, and especially the Attorney General's office, as far as what is the best course of action to take. And I don't know if you want me to share with what I think is the best, or if you want to share, I can go ahead and.
Sure, you can.
Yeah. I think, you know, without having a long dialogue about it, I think, you know, to keep it brief, I think firm registration and all firms registration, I think, is a priority of this board. I think I've heard it many times from board members and from public comment. I think exploring legislative solutions is something that I think is the way we should proceed. And I probably asked this board to empower Davina and I, or Chairwoman Hurt, in some fashion going forward, because we can't meet all the time, to make some decisions on behalf of the board as far as the strategy and implementing that goal. So it would be firm registration through legislative means.
Right, so we actually talked about mini strategies on board, and that was one that we needed to begin right now because of time limits and restraints. And just echoing Board Member Nutella's comment that the subcommittee would like appointment to or authority to pursue the legislation on the in-between time of board meetings. I mean, we will still be very much connected to the board, letting you know direction, strategies. But obviously, we can't meet all the time, and this is something that's going to take rigorous time and effort. We did, because there are deadlines with bill passage, put in with the Legislative Council a submission of language just to hold that marker, sort of like a spot bill, basically, but it's unsponsored at this time. But we do have language at the Leg Council. Today, the board needs to decide whether you will continue to pursue legislation.
Well, my comment is yes, we need to continue to pursue, and I have absolutely no hesitation in agreeing that the two of you, in the form of this committee or task force, whatever it was, can go ahead and do the necessary actions that need to be done between board meetings. I don't worry about what you're going to do, and having worked legislation for state myself for about 20 years at least, if not having worked at following it for 20 years at least. I understand that sometimes quick decisions have to be made in almost a nanosecond at times, and you don't have time to gather a formal meeting and do it that way. So I have no issue with going forward with what you're proposing, giving you that authorization to go ahead and continue to develop this.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Lozinski?
I would just like to echo Tony and Ms. O'Neill's comments. I think your subcommittee needs to have that leeway to proceed without having to call further meetings of the board and need to meet. I am sure that you have you will have a thorough thought process and discussion process. And I am not concerned about where you're going to go, because we're in agreement that we need to go down the legislative route. I would like to hear if there's any public comment.
Oh, absolutely.
But I am in agreement with letting
Just
you move forward.
Don't forget to speak a little louder for the camera and for the people in the back, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just to,
I don't think I have a...
It doesn't work with that.
just to rehash, the board has been talking about this for many, many years. So the subcommittee is very mindful of all the discussions that we've had on this and trying to keep in line with that. So we are very thoughtful of what the board would like to do and what to get accomplished. Are there any public comments on this agenda item? Sure. You're welcome to state your name if you'd like.
Antonia Colon for the Deposition Reporters Association.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'd just like to say how pleased our membership, our board membership is with the fact that the board has taken this direction and has developed language and submitted it for consideration by the Ledge Council. You know that this has been a concern of our members for some time. Of the 3 state associations, ours is no doubt most keenly affected, directly affected by the fact that there are many firms operating in the state without any controls because there is no licensee in management or responsible for the actions of the firm. And this move by the board, I think, is very necessary and very timely, and we're completely in support of your taking this action. It belongs in your hands, we believed. Our licensing board, who regulates licensees, should be the one to carry a bill to insist on registration and CSR responsibility, and we're much in support. And assuming you have a bill and an author and it is introduced, we want you to know that we will do everything we can to support it. Our team of lobbyists, our legislative committee that I'm responsible for, and our members will all do what we can to contact our legislators and get as much support as we can for the bill and make sure that it's passed. I know there will be opposition, but we'll do our best to minimize that and be as effective as possible at trying to get this bill passed, because it is needed, and we much appreciate your efforts in this regard.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments on this item?
Madam Chair, just to be clear, so what exactly is the board, at least for clarification purposes for myself, what is the board considering delegating to a subcommittee? Is it the power, the authority to adopt certain legal legislative strategies, or is it more of a policy type of power?
So from the subcommittee's point of view, it's legislative strategies and it's moving forward with legislation of the Capitol.
And meeting
I guess-
deadlines.
And meeting deadlines, right. So
What I hear is that the subcommittee is requesting the board for authority to act in furtherance of firm registration legislation in between board meetings. That would include negotiating language, consulting with stakeholders on the best strategy to move it forward, educating the members of the legislature.
So I thought this works.
My thought is I have no issue at all with the delegation of the strategy and the kind of work behind the scenes, as it will. I want to be sure that the board has a chance to weigh in on the policy that's going to be affected by the actual language of any bill, because obviously the policy really can be changed by the language. And will there be a consideration and a time for the board to consider the language that is proposed so that you're all on the same page with respect to the policy behind how that registration would take place?
So from my point of view, there will be an opportunity at the time when it's strategically appropriate to share it with everyone. I know we're trying to be very open and transparent, and we're at the very beginning stages. And once the language is formalized and completely public, then we would share that with the public, but behind the scenes preparing.
I think what we don't want the board to have to do is meet every time the language changes, because as you know, it will change several times in the course of a week.
I think that's fine. I want to be sure that clearly, because it could go in any number of ways, and the concept of firm registration I think is great, and I hear that there is a consensus on the concept. I think that depending on what the language is, you could really be looking at different policies depending on really how it shakes down. So I just want to be clear that the board will have a chance, even if the subcommittee is working on language that takes the registration a particular way, has a chance to come in and say, oh, we really, registration is great, but we really thought we'd be going in this way. And that there's a chance to do that in time to effectuate the board's policy behind the registration.
At every board meeting, there will be updates, so as the language is available there, but it is such an organic thing. I would hate for the board to expect that they will see every iteration of it along the way.
That I don't think there's a problem with that. I just want to make sure that there is a sufficient chance for the board to look at a policy that's affected by actual language, which words are everything when it comes to legislation, that the board is not saying, we really thought, you got through the registration part, but you're really taking it in this direction, and we really wanted to go in this direction, and that there's sufficient chance to make those changes. The board will see it and make those recommended changes.
And I assume that is how the process is going to go, because I understand how many times a bill can change in a certain period of time. And what I'm concerned is not being on this subcommittee is when we have, basically, when the subcommittee has come down to, okay, this is language we're proposing, then we all become aware of that and have that discussion.
That'd be great. And you could even do that as a teleconference for that one issue if you were facing a fork in the road with respect to if we take it this way versus that way. I just want to be clear that there would be sufficient time and you're not at the end of the legislative session and the board says, ooh, we really kind of thought we'd be going in this direction.
So just for board security on this, what is the shortest period of time if we needed to do a teleconference in a board meeting that we could request it if there was language that we really thought changed what the board believes?
Well, the general rule is 10 days to, there are provisions for special meetings that take a 48-hour notice for proposed legislation.
We have those two options, because sometimes with legislation, something happens and you've got to
Right,
get in there.
And the Magna-Keene Act does provide for that special meeting for just very particular circumstances, but considering proposed legislation is one of them.
And if a teleconference is called, then each one of those call-in spots has to be open to the public.
Correct.
So the public will always be involved with that aspect.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to say, I think your point is well taken. At some point, there will be, if we get that far, there could be language that is introduced in the legislature. And at that time, it is clearly a public document.
Oh, yeah.
So it's available to the public, it's available to the board. And I think, as long as we will get together as a board, I think, obviously review the language, have directive as far as what is the overarching goal you want to achieve as an outcome of the legislation, so we understand our roadmap. And then I think, knock on wood, there are changes and amendments that occur that could non-substantively change the language or the directive that this board is going to ensue. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't envision those minor changes as something that needs to bring the whole board back together. But if there are amendments that substantively change the outcome and the roadmap that we're directed with, then I see that as a trigger to bring the board back together. But I want to be very clear that every time there's a little change or every time, we need to have the flexibility and the mobility to move quickly. And then when it is substantive and quite possibly could change the directive, then I think we would get together and discuss it.
So the distinction being the wordsmithing that goes into effectuating the policy that the board has agreed on versus having to choose going in one direction or a different direction that might change, that might actually be different from what the board's policy is in the registration. I think I hear an agreement that the general concept of form registration is the direction the board wants to go in, but obviously that the language could change
We've had
Pretty
many,
big portion of that policy.
we've had many closed sessions on this topic, and I feel pretty strongly that I understand what the board is interested in doing and what our policy is. We're now daylighting those closed sessions by moving forward with legislation, but in between.
You mean just subcommittee, not necessarily closed
Not
session?
closed session, I don't think that's what you meant to say.
Oh, what did I say?
It's not closed
Questions?
session.
No,
Just subcommittee.
Well, we did have closed sessions as an entire board
Not a
on the strategy for non-CSR
I see,
subcommittees. We did have closed sessions on that.
Yes.
We talked about it many times. In fact, we had the Attorney General's office talking to us to figure out how we would move forward. So as
As part of litigation. As part of litigation. Okay.
Yes.
So just be clear on that.
So we had a litigation with U.S. Legal many years ago, and then after that, we talked about what was the result of that and how we wanted to move forward. So I think as a base, we have a lot of understanding of what the board policy and what we think to start off with. But definitely, we will stay in sync, and if we need to share something that has changed, that we would come back to the board and get permission.
And I'm comfortable with that.
So would someone like to make a motion?
Was it public comment?
That's true. Thank you. We did take public comment, but we did talk some more.
Yes.
So I'll be happy to take public comment again, just so the board feels like they've heard from everyone.
And everyone feels heard.
Because we heard Mrs. Pallone. So anyone else? No? Okay, great. So could we make a motion?
Was there language for motion?
You can create that. So I,
Want me to take a step?
yeah, sure.
So what I heard was, the board would delegate to the subcommittee the authority to make decisions to further firm registration legislation in between meetings.
Yes, yes, what I have written.
I move. I so move whatever you just said.
Yeah.
To further legislation,
Firm
Registration legislation.
thank you.
Is there a second?
In between
Oh.
meetings.
Sorry.
Thank you for that addition. Thank you.
Sorry. So board member Lizinski moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any public comments? One more time. Therese? No? All right, if we could take a vote.
Ms. Crum is absent. Ms. Lisinski.
Yes.
Ms. Nocella.
Yes.
Ms. O'Neill.
Yes.
Ms. Hurt.
Yes.
Motion carries.
That takes us to agenda item 5. How are we looking on time, actually?
I'm expecting lunch around noon. Are you good?
Is everyone still up for another agenda item?
This is short.
Okay.
This is really, should be very short.
Okay, so.
Information.
As the reporter.
As the reporter, okay. Agenda item 5, online skills exam task force report.
Okay, so our online skills examination policy and procedures task force met on January 20th at Bryan University in Los Angeles, and many thanks to Bryan University for their gracious hospitality, and to the folks from
Vendor, real-time coach.
yeah, Real Time Coach, and I don't Mary Beth, and I don't remember the gentleman's name. Sorry, who came and walked through their process and their product. And I just would like to remind folks before I go any further that our task force is only going to be, we have not decided anything. We are going to bring back to the board recommendations with a draft policy and procedures document. We had our January 20th meeting went very well, but we are not completely finished, and we will be meeting again on February 7th
Yes.
in Sacramento. And I don't remember the location, I guess is back at
HQ2.
HQ2. And I think Ms. O'Neill may have some further comments.
Yeah, I just want to comment in that this is being vetted very thoroughly. And this task force has been looking at all of the issues, discussing them thoroughly, and so it's just not something like, we're rubber stamping, a concept. I feel that based so far on our work that once we get a sort of a policy and procedures recommendation, to aid the board in their discussion, we will have looked at everything. I mean, with the makeup of the task force that we have is varied, and so issues that I don't think of gets raised by somebody else. It's very, the task members complement each other in the sense of drawing from each of their, of our backgrounds, that I think will have a very well put together policy and practice recommendation for the board.
Well, the board thanks the task force for doing this work, and I know it's difficult to coordinate times and dates, so we're all very glad that you're able to get back together again on the 7th and make it work. And we look forward to what comes out of the task force, policy-wise. Okay, so that was an informational item. We'll go, would someone like a comment? Absolutely.
Oh.
May I
I do care what the public thinks.
So I'm just speaking for myself here. The whole deal on the online machine, I totally trust the board that you're vetting it with your committee. So my question really to you as the board is regarding procedures and policies on this. And I'm only just been thinking about this as it relates to the schools and those benchmarks we need to start meeting. And the gainful employment is the battle cry right now in the government. It's all about gainful employment. It's the onus has been put on the schools across the nation. Gainful employment. So I'm asking our board that you get on board with us on that. And if you decide to go with an online skills test, you're talking about using a real-time coach, and they'd be maybe doing it from home or something. I don't know. I'm thinking that's how they do it. Or you go, I don't know, because I'm not on the committee. My question is, would you perhaps, while you're meeting, think outside the box? If you're going to be eliminating a go-to test spot and people are able to take it easily from online, would you please consider letting candidates who fail the portion retake the test sooner than the next 4-month testing cycle? The reason I'm asking is because the accrediting agencies are asking for schools to show placement in the workforce. Well, it's worse upstairs. I think they're at 90 days. 3 months after they graduate, we're supposed to have them placed. ACCET, that I'm trying to pursue, has a requirement that within 120 days of a graduation date, scheduled to graduate date, I have my student placed. It's very difficult with the California CSR exam when each cycle is like 4 months long and a person fails and they can't retake it until the next testing cycle. You see the math is right there. I can't place my people. So if the playing field is changing anyway, I mean, if we're just going into a new thing, I mean, remember we used to have all of our students would go, and within 2 days we'd have all 3 parts taken. They either passed or they didn't. So in 2 days we could kind of control. We knew which students had gone. But now we've lost all control. I love it. There's pros and cons to going to the test sites, these PSI stations. Okay, so they have the freedom, but we lose control over, well, did they go? When are they going to go? Now they're in the next test cycle, and we cannot show placement of our graduate students. So, I don't know that I made that very clear, but if I did, does that make sense? So if they were allowed to say, I don't know, because really my question to you is, I'm not sure, I wrote the question, what is the reasoning behind waiting? I've not ever been sure, other than I understand I don't want to put more burden on the board that, you're pumping out monthly reports of who passed a test. It would help the schools even if you just kept them the same exact way. But there would be more passes within that 4-month test cycle. There would be more people who possibly would have passed the test. The numbers would go up. Does that make sense? Because you mentioned earlier that ACICS is gone. They aren't acting like they're gone. I'm still accredited, if you will, until the end of 2017 with ACICS. So I'm in this, where I have different feet in different places. And they just sent me a thing on Monday, January 23rd, saying that they don't understand what I sent them from the California for my licensure rate. They don't understand the paper they require now because of gainful employment. Everyone's feet is to the fire. So they're now requiring all of us to submit those papers. So we put them on there, but it doesn't make any sense to them. It's all over the board. It doesn't have any names. You can't count noses. What person is that? It's a scattered system as far as they're concerned. And so they were challenging me on my numbers. So now, okay, so I'll go back and I'll try to explain that we have 9 tests basically in a year. They want to know what's your outcome in a year. We have 9 exams. I get 6 reports, and each cycle is like 4 months long. Do you see, they're not going to like this, and the Department of Ed really doesn't like it. They want to be able to show that you graduated these people, you completed them, and you placed them within 3 months. So that's something to think about. I mean, if you're going to go this online thing, maybe make it so that, they didn't pass, but maybe, I'm going to be aggressive, next week they take it again. Isn't that more money for you?
And it's actually contemplated at the test score.
Oh,
meeting.
good. Okay, so that's something good.
Function of how large our test bank is.
Yeah. Well, it's a two-pronged thing. It's your issue that you have, and I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't realize the extent of what
Bad,
you're
yeah,
facing.
it's really bad.
And the fact of getting more people quicker out into the workforce.
Getting them working. Because don't forget that I was thinking it'd make more money for the board because they pay each time they take it. And don't forget that in those 4 months, you know who's taking on the burden? The schools are. Where are they supposed to go? And while they're waiting for the next test, they come back to us for free. So we're using our resources, our teachers, and we're glad to do it, but not really. It's expensive. So you're teaching and you're welcoming your students back in, but they are there and they're there and they're there forever. So I would just rather let's pump these bad boys out and get them working.
Yes.
That's what we want.
Thank you.
Yes, thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
So that takes us to agenda item 6, which is the strategic and communications plan. Would you like to start us off, Ms. Ford?
This is just a typical update that we put before the board so that you can take a look at the items, the progress on the items on the action timeline, basically, showing you where we are with strategic and communications plan. We always ask for feedback from the board if you would like us to change our priorities.
So we had a conference call, the vice chair, myself, and the executive officer about what items were on the strategic plan, and we just drafted a rough timeline of all the action items and how we thought they would fall within this coming year. As you all saw, there's so many things that happened in 2016 that just kind of happened, and so now we want to be much more directed about 2017 and try not to overwhelm the board staff as we did last year, and be prepared. And there are quite a few things. And also it's important to remind folks that because of that sunset period, time is shorter. we're gonna have to get things accomplished and really be in sync and directed when it comes to reporting back all the action items we've accomplished. If I start at the top, well, everyone sees the target dates. Is there anything that strikes them as needing to be done right now, or they're interested in commenting on that's very important to them that they'd like to see happen sooner than later?
Where is our online skills? It's not on here?
So your task force, not everything is articulated in an action item because this was done at the time of the last sunset or strategic plan.
Oh, right.
So this could be edited quite a bit and added with that. But
Okay.
you're going on to your next task force for February the 5th, so we're directed on that.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
So you asked about the task force
Right.
and where it falls, and I
Right.
said we've got a date for you, meeting at the beginning of February. So
Okay. But I don't see it here on the action
Because it
item.
wasn't part of
Because
our.
It was not.
yeah, it was not.
Alright, so,
So these are just like a breakdown of the strategic plan goals.
right,
So we have changed it
yes, we
because
have,
the board does do things in between.
right.
So we're not belittling that or saying it doesn't matter, but this is a product of the strategic plan. So if we're just going to focus on the strategic plan, these are the accomplishments we're working toward.
Yes. Connor? Okay. So the target dates that you see before you, I guess we will continue to try to reach them. Ms. Spinner, is there any comments that you'd like to pass on to the board? No?
No.
Okay. So, as Board Member Lozinski said, we do have around the corner the task force for online skills exam. We also still have a website task force that has to meet. They've not yet. So those are items that are coming in the next month. Okay. Any comments on the communication plan timeline? So we've had this for a while. I think what came out of our last meeting is that we would try to do the website first before we went to an extensive communication plan. Kind of have home base up to date, clear, ready to go. And so the website committee has not met yet. So after they meet, then we'll have more direction on where we take our communication plan. Okay, that takes us to agenda item 7.
Public comment.
I know, I just did it. Are there any public comments? Sorry. Ms. Finch, is that a hand up? Come on.
I'd like to be retired.
Are you sure?
Depends what they ask.
Okay. So there are no public comments. Thank you. Thank you for the update, Ms. Fenner. So that takes us, we've got 15 minutes till 12. Can we continue on? Yeah? Okay. So agenda item 7 is the retired category. This is discussion and possible action regarding creation of the retired license category.
So this comes before the board at the request from a prior meeting that one of the board members had just wanted to have it put on for further discussion. We touched on it briefly, but it's back before the board for a more thorough discussion. We have, in current statute, the ability to have our license be active or inactive. We haven't used that particular category. Right now, the licenses are either active, delinquent, or canceled. We can explore what a retired category would look like. We can talk about that generally as a board if we decide to go forward. If we decide to do that, there is a regulatory process that we would need to go through. And so, depending upon how far we get with that discussion and wordsmithing, if we want to do it all here now, we can do that. Otherwise, if you want to either task staff or a subcommittee with bringing back specific regulatory language to you for further approval, but we would need some type of guidelines as far as what the board is looking at. For instance, would it be basically a courtesy title? Because court reporters, like other professions, identify with what they do for their job. And so it's very nice to be able to be 90 years old and say, I am a licensed court reporter, and my license is still out there, but it shows clearly that you're retired. So there is that kind of courtesy title, if you will. If you decide to move forward with it, the kinds of questions that we would be looking at is what would a retired category allow you to do or prohibit you from doing? And that would be things like the scope of practice. At one point, I know we had talked about allowing retired court reporters to certify transcripts that they had done. Now, that is within our scope of practice. I think it's a little bit unusual in a court reporter's case that, you know, they've reported, done the reporting part of the scope of practice, could be many, many years before, and then transcribe it years later. Right now, you have to have a current license in order to certify it. You need to sign that it's certified. You need to be, that has to be cleared. So that's a consideration before the board. How many times you can unretire or go back and forth in and out, so to speak. That would be something you'd want to know. We don't have mandatory continuing education, but you probably, if you go forward with this, would probably want to include something in there about waiving continuing education requirements in the meantime. You would need to look at things like fees. Is there no fee to retire, or is there a reduced fee to retire? Those are the type of things that we either need to decide as a board, or I can research other boards and bureaus that have retirement categories in place, or we could have a subcommittee of some type that can kind of work through those issues.
To me, just as a start, it sounds like a subcommittee is appropriate because there's so many aspects that need to be reviewed and talked about to maximize. The good thing is that there are other boards that have retired categories, so we have a baseline that we can work with. We don't have to recreate
Is
the
it
whole
consensus
concept.
that we need one?
Nope, not yet. That's just my initial thought. So
Okay.
I'm going to move to other board members what they would like to do. So there has been put before us that Ms. Fenner could figure out language and bring it back to the board.
Yes.
There's the possible appointment of a subcommittee to help you.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is a threshold, because that's kind of assuming we're going forward with it. So the topic is back for discussion. If we don't want to move forward with the retired category, then we don't need to go any farther. So that's the initial decision on this one.
So I remembered from last meeting that, and maybe I'm misremembering that we said we wanted to move forward and that had already been answered, but we can definitely bring it back up before everyone.
No,
To discuss
we
what-
would talk about it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about it. Who would like to start off?
Oh, I can start off.
Okay.
Okay. I had written down some talking points, and Yvonne covered them. Except for the one thing that I had added to myself in thinking about the need. You know, is there a need? And really the bottom line is our mission statement, which is protection of the consumer. And this really generates from officials more than deposition reporters, because, you know, in the 10 years I was a depo reporter, I think I had 4 non-right, you know, that I was, you know, at the end of the deposition they said they didn't need it transcribed, and I never had to go back and do that. So that wasn't a big issue in the depo field, and I don't think it is anymore, or, you know, it has gotten to be a big issue. However, it is a big issue with officials. And even before we came into this time period of, you know, retirement after retirement after retirement in the next 5 years, we would occasionally get the reporter, official reporter that would move out of state. We had a pro tem reporter one time that just disappeared. those things we deal with, and, fortunately not every month, but usually at least once or twice a year, we're in that situation, and we have to, turn over the notes to another reporter. They prepare it the best they can, because that's all we have, to work with. And then, word a reporter certificate, and I'm just generalizing the wording because I don't remember the specific wording, but basically, this is a transcription of the notes of so-and-so to the best of my ability. And I think the reporter that took the proceedings is the best person to transcribe the proceedings, because then you're going to get an accurate transcription of that. And with officials, there's no really limit other than, once you get past the 10-year limit of 10-year requirement of keeping your notes, you have to transcribe whatever. And I see in court, especially with the changes of the laws we've had the last few years, I've been going back and doing pleas and sentencings from the 90s, from the 2000s. I didn't care if it was beyond the statutory time. If I had my notes still, I did it, because it's important to that consumer that they have a chance to maybe mitigate their sentence and go on with their lives. And I also see it's going to be a real issue with the retirements coming along, because what I'm finding is most of the reporters that, at least in my court, and this is all anecdotal, but so far, I would say 80% of the reporters that have retired are done. They don't want to have anything to do with it now. They've been trained over to other reporters to prepare it, give them their notes, etc. But it's still not the same as the original. The original reporter. And I think that if there was a retirement category, that would encourage a reporter to go, to then hang on to the license, because they no longer want to pay the license. However, on the other hand, what I find with reporters is that they're very, very reluctant to give up their license even though they're retired, because it's like they have the back of their mind they're never taking that test again. And so I know reporters that have been retired for 10 years and still pay that every year, pay that license fee, even though they haven't reported for every year. So
I have a question for you, Ms. O'Neill. Would that still be considered working? And would they get a fee for that?
Oh, yes.
So would that mean they're still a licensee?
Well, right now, if they want to be able to transcribe it, sign the certificate, they can bill, and they do. How it's a real fine line. Technically, if they don't prepare it, another reporter prepares it because they can't do it. Technically, the reporter that prepares it would get the fee.
And in some cases, they have the original reporter may prepare it, but have someone else certify that. But the way that they collect the fee would be
between the two of them. Yeah, in other words, they the reporter that has retired or does not have a license, in essence, is acting in the nature of a scopist and preparing the transcript, and then somebody else reviews it, signs that certificate. And that's between the two of them on how it's allowed to be billed, and it's between the two of them of who receives the money.
So could you see a retired active and a retired inactive status? And that what you're explaining is kind of the active part of being retired?
It would, in the sense of if inactive means you're not doing anything with the reporting. You've been a reporter, still want that designation, but you're performing no function as a reporter, then it would be logical to then say that an active or retiree, right? Or active and inactive.
Active and inactive.
Yeah, would have to. That's where we get into what do we include within that title, and how limited is it, and
what kind of fees, and is there a tiered system?
And what is the requirements if they decide, okay, I want to go back to being an active, CSR, then what are the steps to do that? And there's a lot to this.
So, Ms. O'Neill, it sounds like this is far more complicated. We as the board members here are not going to be able to deal with all the nuances. So I don't know what the distinction is between a subcommittee and a task force. But I think we need to have some other group look into the issues. I mean, some subset who are more familiar. It's the world I came from, either you were retired or you weren't retired. You were either emeritus and you were then called back into service, but there was a distinction. But you were either retired or not. And so there's something here that's missing for me. And in fact, what is missing for me is that we don't require, unfortunately, continuing education. So we have these people who are potentially retired, who've not been active, but then suddenly they're doing something, but their skills are perhaps not up to date or whatever. This is beyond my scope of understanding of your profession, but I think we need to turn it over to somebody, some other subgroup, whatever you call it.
Well, I think, number one, it seems to me that what the issue is right now is that do we want to go forth with exploring the possibility?
Right, do we need a category?
In other words, is it such that it's going to be an issue? I mean, there's going to be harm to the consumer because there's these transcripts out there that are not being prepared by the original reporter. I just have my own little segment of what I see, but there's a whole big state out there, and so I don't know if what I'm experiencing is going on everywhere, or we just happen to have these experiences and nobody else does, and it's no big issue. And so.
Can I add something? Something else. I know we have legislation, or actually a court case that came out that prevented or is talking about preventing the EO of having a license or not.
Oh, right.
And I don't know about the public members here, but I know for myself, it has been really important that Ms. Finner has had that background in the industry and understanding to help us move forward with what works theoretically, but what actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that retired category helps you to retain your license and still work for the benefit of California consumers. And then you don't have to make a choice between your license or a job.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also being very beneficial by having that license as a background.
But wasn't there an issue with that, with another court case where it was considered a conflict?
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, right.
So that possibility of having a retired category would be very helpful. Ms. O'Neill gave one example where she could see it, and I'm just giving another where I can see it.
Mm-hmm. And then the other issue that, since the board has agreed or made a motion and voted to increase the license renewal fee. Reporters are funny animals.
They're what? I'm sorry?
Funny animals. Because I can see just the retired reporters I know who are now still renewing their license. When they hear that there's a $50 increase in the yearly thing, that could be the stepping stone to I am not renewing my license. That's it, I'm done. And I think it's very short-sighted, but that's and so I think that might generate more of what somebody's retired, cannot now certify a transcript. I think we're gonna get more of that. I think that the people that are on the fence about should I renew my license this year now that I'm retired, that might push them off the fence when they have to pay $50 more. And I'm trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice, but I understand it.
So we might want to do this sooner than later.
Yeah, and I really think what's needed now is really more of exploratory in the sense of, we've talked about these different issues, but there is a need of, if we want to go forward and explore it, there's that discussion we need to have of, how would this work or how that would work. I guess what I'm thinking to myself is maybe the discussion needs to be had as far as, is this something that's practical, legal, I mean, that kind of thing. Then, if there's a way, if there's a workable way to do it, then do we bring that to the board for the board to say, okay, go further and start looking at language change or whatever it takes to allow it. So I'm not sure how to approach. I'm just not sure if the task force would be at this point what you need. If you're just looking, getting sort of, this is what the law allows us to do now, this is what we would need to do, this is there, we found that there is a real need. I have a lot of questions before I would actually say, okay, let's go further, or let's, really.
Let's create the retired category.
Yes.
So,
Go ahead. What information are you looking for?
Oh, in the sense of, yeah, how, sort of like what we're doing with the task force with the online testing. It's sort of like, well, here's what we have now, here's what we would need to change for it to work for the protection of the consumer. Maybe look at that and should we come up with,
so are there any other thoughts from
The public.
yeah, let's do public comments
that
first.
helpful? Okay.
You would come forward to the microphone, please.
Yes, please. It's really short.
Yeah.
Okay, short is good.
Just a few comments. Kay Ragdoll from Humphreys College.
Welcome.
Thank you. The board might consider looking at other states to see how they accommodate this issue, and that could be a fact-finding task that you could bring back. And on a much less import, I think you're developing something like this might help ensure that you have accurate numbers of licensed CSRs in the state. When we saw the numbers up there of how many renewed, how many processes, how many renewals you processed, it was 6,000 something. I'm going to guess there's quite a few of those people that are not working. And so it kind of skews your numbers when you talk about anticipated job openings versus how many currently licensed people you have. You'd have an more accurate count.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Tony Pullen again. This is more of a question to start out with than a comment, but I'm not clear on what the canceled status amounts to. Is it currently the case that cancellation only happens if a member requests cancellation, or is there a certain period of delinquency? Does it automatically become a canceled license after a certain period of delinquency? Or does it just remain delinquent forever if the person fails to renew?
No, after 3 years, well, you can renew and let it go delinquent again. So it could, in theory, be delinquent in perpetuity.
Okay.
If it's canceled, it could be disciplinary. It could be you didn't contact us after that 3-year period, and then it is an automatic cancellation. Or it is, I don't want to pay the fee anymore, and I'm done. And then it becomes a cancellation.
I was just thinking, for those licenses that become canceled either because of lack of payment, not because of a disciplinary issue, or because a member, a licensee actually says, I'm done, cancel my license, please, I'm not going to pay it any longer. The retired status, if you decided to add that, might encourage some people who have, or are not quite sure what they intend for the future, and are leaving open in their own minds the possibility of continuing to work in the field. and if they have a retired status that allows them to come back without having to be retested, although I suppose you're going to have some, you should have some testing allowed for. Although,
We don't right now.
I have to say on my own personal situation, I have an active license and it remains active, and I will keep it that way. But I haven't reported actively for a long time, and I certainly would not claim that my skills are what they were when I received my license without some work being put in. So there's probably a population of us in that same situation. So how you would require some proof of skills from that retired person who wants to come back into working active status versus those of us who've remained in active status but also have not been working regularly. I don't know. I think there would probably be some discrepancy in approach there. So, I mean, the idea is keep your license active at all times, keep renewing it, and then no one comes and asks you what your skills are, which is unfortunate, frankly, for the protection of the consumer. I would add, though, especially to what Board Member O'Neill said, that obviously this is a bigger issue. Non-transcribed notes that may be requested later is a big issue within the official status. And now that we've got so many courtrooms essentially privatized with BYO reporters, that's going to be an even bigger problem in the future because they're going to be less reachable, findable.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because we don't have private.
In Riverside, yeah.
Civil, so I don't think about that.
Yes, and we don't, my county either. I mean, San Mateo and Santa Clara have not laid off, but
those reporters have to keep their notes. For
sure.
5 years.
And I think the courts differ significantly in their connection with this privatized reporter coming into the department. There's some places where the clerks are very active in getting names, CSR numbers, getting information so they can find these people later on if that's necessary. Other departments, I'm sure, especially Law and Motion, reporters flood in and flood out and no one knows who they are or how to find them later if a transcript's needed. In any event, my other question was, with a canceled license, if somebody wants to bring it active again, I assume retesting is required. Okay.
Start from scratch with a new number. You don't even get the same number.
That's what I assumed. Then in reviewing that retired status, I think you almost have to have a similar requirement or some sort of testing done in some way, a proof of skill level.
I think I've seen some states that have tests that you
For a retest of some sort. And, it'd have to be not just skill levels, I think, frankly, but a written test to some extent. So, because the law could have changed significantly in 8 or 10 years that the person was not active in the field.
And the Business and Professional Codes 464 says complete any other requirements as specified by the board.
So you'd have some freedom there.
Right, there is freedom built in.
I think that would be a deal breaker for the reasons that
I know.
Ms. Malone just said.
And maybe
no one wants to take that test together.
Personally, also tied in with what Ms. O'Neill said about reporters being very concerned about what their license costs and the additional $50 that will be added on. I would say that if you want to keep a retired status, which is close to being as good as active, or might allow you to continue to work or come back into the field actively, or to turn out transcripts, whatever the case may be, of notes you've already taken, that perhaps the license fee should be the same. Otherwise, you're going to find a whole lot of reporters suddenly becoming retired. Especially if it's set up in a way that allows you to still do a certain amount of your work, perhaps your transcription, because they will do that to save the $50. I know it will happen. So that I think they perhaps would have to pay the same licensure fee that everybody active does. My own take on that. I think I'll see that, you'll see that happening. And I might also mention, I think this is fair to mention now, that it may have some bearing on the legislation as to what status your license is in. If you're going to be responsible for a firm, can you be retired? Or does it have to be an active license?
It's not as simple.
I know, it's not. No, I thought, oh, fine, create status. Like, wait a minute, there are
Yeah, there's lots of
lots of things. Is it, can you partially work with it? You can't write, you can't report, but you can transcribe? Maybe it would allow them to do that. And certify a transcript, but you cannot be a reporter, you cannot create the record.
Thank you for your comment.
Sure.
I just have, hi, Diane Freeman from the Deposition Reporter Association. Just piggybacking on what Ms. Plone just said. I think this maybe came up, someone called me, a firm owner, and she hasn't reported in years because she had some health issues, but she has a firm. And she was shocked that she thought we had a retired status. And I said, well, I can't help you. You have to go, this is a CR board. I mean, it's not my purview. But her thing was she's running a firm, and I guess she hasn't paid her dues, and it said delinquent when she went in there, and somebody was checking on her background. So what I'm thinking, piggybacking on Ms. Bloom, then you would have, because she could just keep paying her dues and then all of a sudden start working. She's not going to, but other people. And so that would be harm to the consumer because they would not have the skill. I wouldn't think. I wouldn't if I hadn't worked in 10 years and then something happened and I needed to go back to work. So that was, and I didn't realize when she called me, she goes, it should be a simple thing. You know, you just make a retired status. Well, obviously, it's not simple.
There are a lot of things to say. Thank you for your comment.
Can I come back and ask? Are we back to?
Yeah, sure.
More public comment. So, okay, I don't know the demographics, but I'm guessing that there are potentially a lot of CSRs who would want to retire. And what would that do to our financial situation as a board? I mean, if we have suddenly a lot of people who are dropping their licenses, I mean a lot, does that impact? I mean, that will have some impact on our bottom line.
Yeah, I think there is a financial impact. How big it is unclear.
Right.
Yeah, it's unclear what that would look like. Are there any other thoughts?
No, I was right in line with what you were thinking about as far as once this went back to the budget. If assuming we create a retired status and assuming that the fee is lowered. And it may not be. You don't know. I don't know. But that's my primary concern is what does it do to our budget?
So what I'm hearing from the board is there are a lot of question marks and there's not a definite move forward with this category.
I don't know.
So is there more information that you would like to get from staff or appointing a subcommittee or talking about this again at our next board meeting or sometime thereafter to think about all the things that we've heard this afternoon? Any thoughts? Ms. Marks.
I can maybe throw out a suggestion now. I've been involved with the board for some time, so I don't know what's been considered. From a regulatory standpoint, I would have a little bit of question about a status, a retired status that allows a portion of practice. And that can be fleshed out a little bit more as the board decides whether or not to pursue that. I'm wondering if the board has ever pursued regulations to promulgate an inactive status. Many boards, most that I know of, do have an inactive status. You have the authority to do that by regulation. What that does is create a little bit more of a clear border between those who can practice and those who can't, with a relatively easy way to go back and forth across or through the door. folks, you don't have any active CE. You don't have any CE requirements, as I understand it, for the boards that I am familiar with that do have both CE requirements and inactive status. One of the reasons why people go inactive is they're not practicing and they don't really want to keep up on the CE. And if they then choose to go active, they need to get themselves current in their CE. You don't have that. You can look at some other requirement depending on how long somebody's license has been inactive. But it might be a way to consider, you do have the authority to make the renewal fee less than an active renewal fee, so that costs of people saying, gee, do I now spend, I was spending $125, now do I spend $175 to stay active? It could be some lower fee, and this gives the licensee the chance to see, well, I think I want to retire, but who knows, I may get that call, and so I will go along and pay a much lower, not much, it's a bit lower potentially renewal fee, stay inactive until I get that call that says, hey, we need this transcript. You call the board, you go inactive, and then the board, I think from a regulatory standpoint, has a much clear-cut line of who is licensed, who is able to practice, and what kind of standards can we hold them to. So it might be an initial step while you're still considering retired status, because you can do it by regulation, to go forward and say, let's see how many people go inactive. That would sort of give you an idea of what it would do to your budget, and then you don't have a question, because if those people are inactive, they cannot practice. And if that's, and if they don't want to practice, then they are not in the they are not in the position of having to choose whether or not to keep paying full renewal or possibly let it go to like the negative status, etc. So I just throw that out as one option that the board might want to look at for your next meeting. Look at what language, what potential regulatory language might look like to have an inactive category.
Are there any comments to that suggestion? Or did it just get more complicated?
Yeah. No, I like that inactive definition, and I like the flexibility. It is, again, unfortunate we don't have continuing ed credit requirements, because it's just hard for me to fathom somebody going in and out of that status and still maintaining a skill level that is equal to a current practicing reporter.
That's
it's
true.
Hard to fathom that.
You have people who have active licenses who sounds like haven't reported for years,
Right.
so there really is no other requirement. As long as you don't have CE, there's no requirement other than there's probably some general requirement to only be doing what you're competent to do. So
Yeah.
So you have that same situation now.
Which doesn't make me feel well comfortable.
That's a different discussion.
What would have to happen staff-wise for the inactive status, or what kind of burden or complications, if any, would that put on renewals or licensing?
It would just be the regulatory process. You'd have to come up with a language, and then it would go through regulation. It's just a different process.
We can barely hear you. Sorry.
I'm sorry. The effect on staff would just be the time to develop the language for the regulation, and then going through the regulatory process itself. Processing it as a renewal or processing it as a change of status wouldn't be a significant impact on the workload.
Okay, it would not be.
It would not be.
Sure, if you could come forward with a comment.
Hi, welcome. I'm Monica, and I'm a student at Argonaut. Thank you for having me. I have to go through a lot of, regulatory things all the time and fill out forms and everything. And I was just thinking, with the active status of your license, but people that are not practicing that, when we do renew our licenses, maybe to have some sort of proof that we're somehow still connected to the field, either show proof that we're still working, proof that we are having some sort of continuing education, or proof that we're still connected with what we're doing, instead of just checking a box either active or inactive, to maybe just sort of add that on to when we renew our licenses, to make sure that we're protecting the consumer from year to year. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I focus everybody back to, retired category or an inactive status pursuant, or do we want to think about this more, marinate on what we've heard?
I don't think I know all of them. I don't think I know all the ramifications.
So what more would you like to see or hear?
I don't know.
I think the first thing that I'd like to see is there some type of research out there that talks about what other states do, active versus inactive versus retired. Maybe go from there.
Okay, so should we put this on a future agenda item with more details?
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Please.
Board Member Nocello, would you want other states or other boards within California? Or both?
I'm trying to make it so that it's consistent to our profession.
Okay.
So
Other states?
Other states.
Okay.
Is that something, Ms. Minow, you could bring back to the board in an agenda item, and we can talk about it some more before we decide definitively to go forward with either an inactive status or a retired category?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I did take public comments, so I'm going to move on to agenda item 8. That would be future meeting dates. Typically, we schedule meetings around exams. We reach out to everybody and ask for what they could do, whether they can make it or not. Yvonne has put forth our board calendar, and so you can get an idea of when we'll be looking for the next board meeting. Are there any comments or questions or anything?
Do we want to get out our calendars? Is that what you want us to do?
No, I think and what we usually do is the poll is put out to everybody when we can next meet. So we can talk about that offline.
What do you want to talk about? Like more of the general, should we have a board meeting in 3 months?
You can speak to it now if you would like to. I mean, we typically have board meetings around exams, correct? Yeah. So right now, as you see, there's one, the next one is in March. There's one in July, and then the last one in December. So I don't think we have to pin down a date right now, but keep that in mind with your schedule in the future to be available around those dates.
Well, the other thing is we want to make sure we have something to talk about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I mean,
that's why it's good to get back. We'll get back together over an email and figure out what's the best thing to move forward. Unless there's something that you would really like to talk about.
No, I just, this is my second board meeting in, a month or something.
I know how you feel.
So,
okay.
Just not wanting to rush into another board meeting.
Any public comment?
No.
Okay. So that takes us to agenda item 9, public comment for items not on the agenda. Are there any? Seeing that there are none. That takes us to this one. We have a certificate of appreciation for Frederick Chanyu. He will be moving on to another opportunity and will not be with the board anymore. So we would like to present this certificate in recognition of your dedicated service and support to the Court Reporters Board and to the consumers of the state of California. We thank you for all the time that you've put with our board.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone's welcome to make any comments, otherwise we can move on to closed session.
So we're gonna close the open session.
Yes, so thank you all. Oh, would anybody like to have public comment? Or, no, we're good? Okay. Yes, please.
So, Melissa's here, return to open session, but I assume there will be, the closed session will end the meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
you can leave us.
We'll see you next
So
time.
your